Hello and welcome to the interview in France 24. 25 years ago, Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses, was hit by a fatwa from Ayatollah Khomeini, supreme leader of Iran, and since then is living under death threats. At the time, he was accused of blasphemy against the Quran. Then Theo van Gogh, a Dutch filmmaker, was slain in the streets of Amsterdam for similar reasons by a Muslim fanatic. Other threats were thrown here and there against any writer, journalist, artist who dared to draw the Prophet Muhammad or to criticize any aspect of Islam. Name them the journalist of Jyllands-Posten in Denmark, Ayaan Hirsi Ali or Taslima Nasreen. Then, of course, on January 7, 12 people died in a machine gun attack at Charlie Hebdo in Paris. Among them were France's finest cartoonists. The terrorists shouted that they had avenged Prophet Muhammad. My guest today is Caroline Fourest, journalist and author and a former Charlie Hebdo writer. Her last book was just published here in France, L'éloge du blasphème, or In Praise of Blasphemy. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on the studio of France 24.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to quote the last sentence of your book. Those who think they will avoid war by behaving like cowards are wrong. The war has already begun. Only courage can bring us back peace. That sounds very Churchillian. Do you consider yourself a woman in war, and against who or what?
I'm living less than my friend of Charlie Hebdo, but I'm living under death threats. I'm living under a high level of risk for just exercising my duty of journalist, informing. It is a war of ideas. It is not a war that we're going to win with weapons, even if we are under a terrorist threat.
But you're fighting weapons.
I fight with words, only words. I try to bring some clarification in a huge confusion, because I'm seeing people who are accusing now Charlie Hebdo, the victims, of being the violent. The people who just didn't answer to death threats and to really violent people, the fanatics, not the Muslims, the fanatics. They did answer by very pacifist drawings, and now they have been accused of being violent.
But how can you fight weapons with words? The threat comes from everywhere. Look at what happened in Texas, for example. You could have been there, for example.
Yes, and I have a lot of friends who are still possibly a target. But yes, it's my work is to be journalist. So I'm fighting only by words. This is where it's so important to stop confusing everything. This is the moment to stop confusing people who are doing blasphemy with people who are really racist. And even if there is racist people, which is absolutely not the case with Charlie Hebdo, nothing can compare a symbolic violence with a real physical violence.
First, about the title of the book, isn't that enough to defend freedom of speech? But why insisting, for example, in praising blasphemy? Do you admit that it can hurt people, Muslim people?
Of course, blasphemy can hurt believers, of course, religious people, and it always have done that. But this is the way we did build our secular democracy in France. And it's part also of trying to explain that to many of my American and English friends and
I remember
colleagues.
hearing a Muslim protester in Paris, for example, saying that he loved his prophet much more than his mother, for example. It's something that we have
But
trouble
the Christians
to
feel the same. You have a Christian, the Pope said the same. The Pope said that you can answer physically, being physical violence when someone is doing a blasphemy, because it's like an insult to your mother. We try to explain that you don't have to like blasphemy. You can feel shocked by blasphemy. What you need to do is to defend the right to do blasphemy, because this right is against the basis of our secular democracy. This is, if not, you're forbidding to criticize ideas when it is religious ideas.
And today, in doing that, you're putting a life in danger, right?
Now, especially in a context where people are killing others because they don't believe the same things. And if you think that stopping blasphemy, you will have peace, no, because the terrorists they're going to go after the Jew just because they are Jew. They are going to go after the Muslims because they are not Muslims like them, fanatics. So blasphemy, the people who are defending blasphemy, the believers and the non-believers are on the same boat in that story. This is what we have to not forget.
You're saying that, rightly, that most of the countries, half of the countries represented at the UN have legislation against blasphemy, and in some countries like United States of Britain, it's really a taboo. How do you think that France is going to win this war?
Again, let's clarify something. France do not want to invade the world with secularism. I hope for Pakistanis, for example, that they could live one day in a secular society, because this day the religious minority will stop to be oppressed in the name of this blasphemy law. Because can I remind that it is the Christian first, but also the non-Sunni religious minority who are oppressed in the name of this blasphemy law. But let me clarify something. I just want to explain what is the French culture there. Charlie Hebdo is only doing what we did for centuries about the Catholic Church, using, for example, the face of Jesus to criticize the Christian fanaticism, to criticize when the church is going against secularism. And when I'm hearing some writers explaining that Charlie Hebdo want to mock Muslims, this is absolutely wrong. Charlie Hebdo is an anti-racist magazine. It's probably the first anti-racist magazine in France. It did fight against National Front
Even
since
if
the
you
beginning.
can find, for example, cartoons seen in Charlie Hebdo and some right-wing website, for example, who has been condemned
don't
for that.
confuse
it happens.
everything,
It happens.
please. Some
Caroline, it
clarity.
happens.
What?
How
No.
do you explain that?
Because there is extreme right who pretend to be secularist today because they understand it is more fashionable. So, of course, they're going to try to pretend they are a little bit Charlie Hebdo. But people who know Charlie Hebdo know that it is absolutely not the case, that the cartoons inside Charlie Hebdo was not to mock Muslims. It was to mock ISIS, Daesh, to mock Al-Qaeda, to mock fanatics.
The same cartoons can be used for this purpose or another purpose can be, for example,
Of course.
mocking the Muslims
Of
or
course,
racist
this
purpose.
is why it is so important to explain each time and to consider the context and the intention. You cannot compare the intention of a cartoon published in an anti-racist magazine where all the religion can be mocked, and a cartoon who is published on an extreme right side who is only attacking Muslims and Islam.
It's maybe the fact that now there are more than 200 American writers, they have trouble to understand that, and they decided to boycott the Penn Center award ceremony because an award was going to be bestowed to Charlie Hebdo. And I'm going to quote one of this quotation from Joyce Carol Oates, who's among the writers, and here's what she said. She said, these drawings of the Prophet have done more harm and humiliation to a section of the French population that is already marginalized, embattled, and victimized, that is shaped by the legacy of France's various colonial enterprise. What do you think of that?
I think it's exactly the propaganda we've heard after the slaughter of my friends on many American and English channels. I felt, as everybody felt offended those days, I would say that as a former journalist of Charlie Hebdo, I felt deeply offended by this confusion. Because first, they don't know those drawings, they don't know Charlie Hebdo, they're explaining it completely wrong, in the wrong way. Charlie Hebdo never mocked Muslims in a racist way. They use the symbol of a religion to preserve that symbol from the instrumentalization of the fanatics and to denounce the fanatics who are using Mohammed to kill cartoonists. If denouncing Al-Qaeda, if denouncing ISIS, by saying Mohammed, the Prophet of Islam, is not on your side. We prefer to think that Mohammed is on the side of the cartoonist, of people who have the sense of humor. If doing that, which is exactly what Charlie Hebdo did, if doing that is considered as mocking, humiliating weak people, that means that Al-Qaeda is weak people, that ISIS is weak people. It's confusing Muslims with those fanatics. The people who are doing that, those writers, are responsible of finding excuse to terrorists, are just reversing the world. They are using world to reversing the world.
The fact is that the cartoonists are using a religious symbol to mock ISIS and the Islamic State. Maybe they can miss the target. Maybe they're going to miss the Islamic State and they strike decent Muslims that are.
This is the problem of having a global debate on cartoons that those channels in America and in England didn't show to their audience. How I can explain to you that those cartoons were completely... When, for example, after the slaughter of our friends, after I've seen two people using Mohammed, the name of Mohammed, to kill my friends, when Charlie Hebdo is answering by a simple cartoon saying, Mohammed is Charlie Hebdo. Mohammed is crying because Mohammed has nothing to do with your crime. Saying that this cartoon is racist against Muslims is just the opposite. And you understand that it is a global debate where everybody can hear what you want to hear, want to erase the context and the intention. My job as journalist is to put back this context.
Okay, another thing. Why do you believe that those who fight, for example, Islamophobia, it's a word that you think is twisted, refuse to take seriously other forms of racism, and especially anti-Semitism? Can you explain that?
It's part of that confusion. Islamophobia means phobia against Islam, not phobia against Muslims. So at the moment you use this term, you're confusing blasphemy or criticizing religion, or even sometimes just criticizing fanatics with being racist against Muslims. This is why I do prefer to use the word racist, because I'm fighting, as Charlie Hebdo is doing, against racism against Muslims, and at the same time against fanatics who use Islam.
But why do you think
to
that these
attack
people,
the
for
other
example,
people.
they don't want to take seriously anti-Semitism?
Because today we have people like Dieudonné and others who want to divide the anti-racist side. We want to say you have to choose between defending Muslims or Jew. And of course, Dieudonné choose to attack Jew in a very racist way and pretend that it is on the side of equality. Charlie Hebdo is defending the right to mock every religion, but in the same time refuse to incite to hatred against anyone for what it is, against Jew, against Muslims, against Christian also, against atheists, of course, who are
Caroline,
the forgotten people in that story.
If there's no kind of understanding with the other people, your enemies, it means that this war has no end. It will never end.
I'm less pessimistic than you are. There is terrorist. Terrorist is one problem. This is a military war. It is not mine. And there is the war on the level of the ideas. In this war, what we want just to do is to bring clarification, stop misunderstanding. We are just helping people to support violent physical attack, terrorist attacks against people who are just expressing their view on religion, on society, because they are just free thinkers. Once we do this clarification, we will feel a little bit more happier, a little bit less in danger.
Thank you, and thanks for watching. You can find this show and many others whenever you want on France24.com. Éloge du blasphème, Caroline Fourest, soon to be translated maybe?
I hope so. You cannot imagine.
Thank you.